"Nobody sees what I do," whispered Linda Thompson as she wiped away tears in the empty hospital corridor. Her scrubs still damp from cleaning up another Alzheimer's patient who no longer remembered her name. For 20 years, Linda had been the invisible angel of Mercy General Hospital's memory care unit, working double shifts, missing family gatherings, and pouring her heart into caring for patients who would forget her kindness by the next morning. She had watched hundreds of families say goodbye to loved ones who had slowly disappeared before their eyes, and through it all, Linda had been the constant presence, feeding them, bathing them, holding their hands during confused moments, and maintaining their dignity when everything else was lost. But on this particular night in March 1975, Linda was at her breaking point, emotionally and physically exhausted from decades of giving everything she had to people who couldn't thank her. What she didn't know was that Elvis Presley was walking through those same hospital corridors, visiting a friend, and was about to witness something that would change how he viewed heroism forever. But to understand why Elvis would risk his reputation to honor a woman the world ignored, you need to know about the personal tragedy that drove Linda's devotion. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night at Mercy General Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, and Linda Thompson was finishing what had become a routine 18-hour shift in the Alzheimer's and dementia care unit. At 45 years old, Linda had devoted her entire adult life to caring for patients trapped in the cruel progression of memory loss, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of 20 years of invisible sacrifice had finally become too much to bear. Linda walked slowly through the dimly lit corridors of the memory care unit, checking on patients one final time before the night shift took over. In room 302, she adjusted the blankets of Mrs. Patterson, an 82-year-old former school teacher who had been asking for her mother every day for the past 6 months. In room 304, she quietly repositioned Mr. Chen, making sure he was comfortable and wouldn't fall from his bed during the night. Each patient represented not just a medical case, but months or years of Linda's life. She knew their habits, their fears, their small preferences that made their confined world a little more bearable. She knew that Mrs. Rodriguez responded well to Spanish lullabies, that Mr. Williams became calm when she described his hometown of Birmingham, and that Mrs. Foster still smiled when Linda brushed her hair, even though she hadn't spoken a word in 2 years. But the patients didn't know Linda. They couldn't form new memories, couldn't retain the faces of people who cared for them, couldn't express gratitude for the countless small acts of kindness that made their days bearable. Every morning, Linda started over with people who had no memory of her dedication from the day before. The work was emotionally devastating, physically exhausting, and completely invisible to the outside world. Healthcare administration viewed caregivers like Linda as easily replaceable support staff, not the skilled professionals they actually were. Families focused their gratitude on doctors and nurses, rarely acknowledging the people who provided the daily hands-on care that maintained their loved ones' dignity and comfort. Linda earned less in a year than some people spent on a single vacation, despite working twice as many hours as most professionals and dealing with situations that required extraordinary patience, skill, and emotional strength. She had no union representation, minimal benefits, and was expected to handle increasingly complex medical and behavioral challenges with inadequate training and support. As Linda finished her rounds and headed toward the break room to collect her things, she felt the familiar wave of exhaustion mixed with something new despair. For the first time in her 20-year career, she was seriously considering quitting. "I can't do this anymore," Linda whispered to herself as she sat down in the empty break room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows on institutional furniture that had seen too many tired healthcare workers reach their breaking points. Linda thought about her own journey to this moment. 23 years ago, she had been a young woman working as a secretary in downtown Memphis when her mother, Dorothy, began showing signs of memory problems. At first, they dismissed it as normal aging, forgotten appointments, misplaced keys, occasional confusion about dates. But the symptoms progressed rapidly. Dorothy began forgetting Linda's name, then her face, then the fact that she had a daughter at all. The vibrant, intelligent woman who had raised Linda with such love and wisdom slowly disappeared into a fog of confusion and fear. Linda had become her mother's primary caregiver, learning through trial and error how to manage the progression of Alzheimer's disease. She discovered techniques for reducing her mother's anxiety, found ways to maintain Dorothy's dignity during the most difficult moments, and learned to find meaning in small connections that transcended the loss of memory. When Dorothy passed away after a 5-year battle with Alzheimer's, Linda made a promise at her graveside. She would dedicate her life to ensuring that other Alzheimer's patients never felt alone or forgotten, the way her mother sometimes had, despite Linda's best efforts. That promise had led Linda to Mercy General Hospital, where she had spent the last 20 years caring for hundreds of patients in various stages of memory loss. She had become an expert in Alzheimer's care, developing techniques for communication, behavioral management, and comfort care that were recognized by medical professionals throughout the region. But expertise meant nothing without recognition, and recognition seemed impossible when your patients couldn't remember you, and the healthcare system treated your work as unskilled labor. As Linda sat in the break room contemplating her future, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. It was unusual for anyone to be walking through the memory care unit this late at night. Visiting hours had ended at 9 p.m., and the night shift staff was still getting organized. Curious, Linda stepped out of the break room and saw a man in dark clothes and sunglasses walking slowly through the corridor, reading the nameplates on patient doors. Even in the dim lighting, something about his silhouette seemed familiar. "Excuse me," Linda said softly, not wanting to wake any patients. "Can I help you find someone?" The man turned around, and Linda immediately recognized him despite the sunglasses and late hour. It was Elvis Presley. "I'm looking for room 315, Elvis said quietly. "He's a friend of my father's," Linda nodded. "Mr. Henderson is one of our long-term residents, but visiting hours ended at 9. Are you family?" Elvis hesitated. "Not exactly, but I promised Vernon I'd check on him. Robert worked with my father years ago, and his family thought it might help if he saw a familiar face." Linda understood the complexity of the situation. Families often held on to hope that familiar visitors might trigger recognition or provide comfort to their loved ones, even in advanced stages of dementia. Sometimes it helped, sometimes it confused patients more, but the desire to try was always understandable. "Mr. Henderson has been having a difficult time lately," Linda explained. "He's often agitated in the evenings. But if you'd like, I can take you to see him. I know how to approach him in a way that won't upset him." Elvis looked relieved. "I'd appreciate that, ma'am. I don't know much about this disease, but I understand it changes people." As they walked toward room 315, Elvis couldn't help but notice Linda's obvious exhaustion. Her scrubs were wrinkled from an 18-hour shift, her eyes were red from crying, and she moved with the careful pace of someone who had been on her feet for too long. "Are you okay?" Elvis asked. "You look like you've had a hard day." Linda laughed bitterly. "A hard day? Try a hard 20 years. This isn't just a job, Mr. Presley. This is my life." Something in Linda's voice made Elvis stop walking. He had met many people in healthcare settings over the years, but he had never heard such a combination of dedication and despair in someone's voice. "What do you mean?" Elvis asked. Linda paused outside Mr. Henderson's room. Here was Elvis Presley, one of the most famous people in the world, asking her about her work. No one had asked her about her work in years, not as a person, not with genuine curiosity about what she did or why she did it. "I've been taking care of Alzheimer's patients for 20 years, Linda said quietly. "I know every technique for managing confusion, every method for providing comfort during the worst moments of this disease. I can spot the early signs of a behavioral episode, prevent falls, and maintain dignity for people who have lost everything they ever were." She gestured toward the rooms around them. "I know Mrs. Patterson in 302 sleeps better if you play big band music softly. I know Mr. Williams in 306 gets agitated if you approach him from his left side, because his vision is impaired. I know Mrs. Foster in 310 still responds to the scent of lavender even though she hasn't spoken in 2 years. Elvis listened intently as Linda continued. But nobody sees this work, Mr. Presley. Families thank the doctors. Insurance companies pay the hospitals. Society recognizes nurses and medical technicians, but the people who actually provide daily care, who hold hands during frightening moments, who maintain dignity when everything else is lost, we're invisible. Linda's voice began to break with emotion. I make less money than a restaurant server. I have no benefits, no job security, no recognition for the skills I've developed over 20 years. And the patients I care for can't remember my name or thank me for what I do. Elvis was stunned. He had never considered the people who provided hands-on care for the most vulnerable members of society. In his world, everyone was visible: musicians, sound engineers, lighting technicians, security personnel. Everyone had a role that was acknowledged and compensated. Why do you do it? Elvis asked. Linda wiped her eyes. Because my mother died of Alzheimer's 7 years ago, and I promised her I would make sure other families didn't have to watch their loved ones suffer alone the way we did. The simple honesty of Linda's answer hit Elvis like a physical blow. Here was someone who had dedicated her entire adult life to keeping a promise made to her dying mother, providing comfort to people who couldn't thank her, working in conditions that would drive most people away, and receiving no recognition for any of it. Can I ask you something else? Elvis said. What would it mean to you if people understood what you do? Linda considered the question. I don't need fame, Mr. Presley. I just want people to understand that caring for Alzheimer's patients requires real skill, real knowledge, and real strength. I want families to know that their loved ones are being cared for by professionals who see them as human beings, not just cases to manage. And what would help you personally? Linda hesitated. This felt like a strange conversation to be having with Elvis Presley in a hospital corridor at midnight, but his interest seemed genuine. Honestly, I need better training resources, better pay, and some recognition that this work matters. I'm at my breaking point, Mr. Presley. I've given everything I have, and I don't know how much longer I can keep doing it. Elvis nodded thoughtfully. Let's go see Mr. Henderson now. But Linda, may I call you Linda? I want to talk with you more after we're done. Would that be okay? Linda agreed, and they quietly entered room 315. Robert Henderson was awake, sitting up in bed and looking confused. At 78 years old, he was in the middle stages of Alzheimer's, aware enough to know something was wrong, but unable to understand what was happening to him. Robert, Linda said softly, approaching his bed slowly and making eye contact. I brought someone to see you. This is Elvis, Vernon Presley's son. Do you remember Vernon? Robert's eyes focused on Elvis, and for a moment, recognition flickered across his face. Elvis, Vernon's boy? You got so tall. Elvis smiled and pulled up a chair next to the bed. Hey there, Robert. Dad sends his regards. He wanted me to check on you. For the next 20 minutes, Elvis and Robert had a conversation that meandered through decades of memories, some accurate, some confused, but all meaningful to Robert in that moment. Linda watched Elvis adapt his communication style to Robert's cognitive level, speaking slowly, remaining patient when Robert repeated himself, and finding ways to connect with him despite the limitations imposed by the disease. What impressed Linda most was that Elvis never corrected Robert's confused memories or became frustrated with his repetition. He seemed to understand instinctively that the goal wasn't to force Robert back to reality, but to meet him where he was and provide comfort in that space. When Robert finally fell asleep, Elvis and Linda quietly left the room and walked back toward the break room. How did you know how to talk to him like that? Linda asked. Most people try to correct the confusion or get frustrated when patients repeat themselves. I watched you, Elvis replied. I saw how you approached him, how you spoke to him, how you made him feel safe before introducing something new. You've developed real expertise in this. Linda felt tears forming in her eyes again. It was the first time in years that someone had recognized her work as requiring skill and knowledge. Linda, Elvis continued, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. If you had the resources, the recognition, and the support you needed, what would you want to accomplish in Alzheimer's care?" Linda sat down in the break room chair, overwhelmed by the question. No one had ever asked her about her professional aspirations or what she might accomplish with proper support. "I'd want to train more caregivers in the techniques I've developed," she said slowly. "I'd want to create programs that help families understand what their loved ones are experiencing. I'd want to advocate for better working conditions and pay for care workers. What else? I'd want to change how society thinks about Alzheimer's patients and the people who care for them. These aren't just old people waiting to die, Mr. Presley. They're human beings with rich histories, and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And the people who care for them are professionals who deserve recognition and compensation that reflects the value of their work." Elvis leaned forward. "Linda, what if I told you I wanted to help you accomplish those goals?" Linda stared at him in disbelief. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want to use my platform to bring attention to Alzheimer's care and the people who provide it. I want to help you get the training resources you need, the recognition you deserve, and the support to expand your work." "Why would you do that?" Elvis was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because tonight I learned about a kind of heroism I never knew existed. I perform for thousands of people who cheer and applaud and tell me I'm great. But you've been performing acts of heroism every day for 20 years for people who can't applaud, can't thank you, and can't even remember your name. And you do it anyway, because you made a promise to your mother." Linda began crying again, but this time they were tears of hope rather than despair. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "I'm proposing a partnership," Elvis said. "I'll provide funding for caregiver training programs, better equipment and resources for this unit, and a campaign to raise awareness about Alzheimer's care. In return, you help me understand what families and caregivers really need, and you help me make sure the money is used effectively. Mr. Presley, I'm just a caregiver. I'm not qualified to manage large programs or work with someone like you. Linda, you've been managing complex medical and behavioral situations for 20 years. You've developed expertise that medical schools don't teach. You understand this disease and the people affected by it better than anyone I've met. You're exactly the person who should be leading these efforts." Over the following months, Elvis and Linda developed a partnership that transformed Alzheimer's care in Memphis and beyond. Elvis provided funding for the Linda Thompson Center for Alzheimer's Care Excellence, a training facility that taught Linda's techniques to caregivers throughout the region. The center offered comprehensive programs covering communication strategies, behavioral management, comfort care techniques, and family support services. Linda developed curricula that combined practical skills with emotional support, helping caregivers manage the psychological challenges of working with Alzheimer's patients. Elvis also funded significant improvements to Mercy General's memory care unit, including better staffing ratios, improved training programs, and enhanced working conditions for caregivers. Linda was promoted to Director of Alzheimer's Care with a salary that finally reflected her expertise and contributions. But perhaps most importantly, Elvis used his public platform to bring attention to Alzheimer's disease and the people who provided care. He performed benefit concerts, gave interviews about the importance of supporting caregivers, and frequently visited memory care facilities to highlight the work being done there. Linda Thompson taught me that heroism isn't always visible, Elvis said in a television interview. Some of our greatest heroes work in places where their contributions can't be measured by applause or recognition. They do it anyway because they understand that dignity and comfort matter, even when the people receiving care can't express gratitude. The publicity generated by Elvis's involvement brought national attention to issues in Alzheimer's care. Other celebrities began supporting similar causes, funding increased for memory care research, and working conditions for caregivers began to improve across the country. Linda found herself testifying before Congress about the need for better training and compensation for care workers. She consulted with hospitals and nursing homes about implementing her care techniques. She wrote training manuals that became standard resources in healthcare education programs. Elvis didn't just change my life, Linda reflected years later. He changed how America thinks about Alzheimer's care and the people who provide it. He took work that was invisible and made it visible, took skills that were unrecognized and made them valued. The partnership between Elvis and Linda lasted until his death in 1977. During those 2 years, they established programs that trained thousands of caregivers, improved conditions for countless patients, and raised awareness about Alzheimer's disease throughout the country. After Elvis's death, the Elvis Presley Foundation continued funding Linda's programs. She expanded her work nationally, establishing training centers in major cities and developing certification programs for Alzheimer's care specialists. Linda continued working directly with patients until she was 65, then transitioned to full-time education and advocacy. Her techniques became standard practice in memory care facilities worldwide, and her approach to caregiver training influenced healthcare education throughout the industry. When Linda passed away in 2010, her funeral was attended by hundreds of caregivers whose careers had been shaped by her teaching, families whose loved ones had received better care because of her advocacy, and healthcare professionals who had learned to value and support the people providing hands-on patient care. The Linda Thompson Institute for Memory Care, established with funding from the Elvis Presley Foundation, continues her work today. The institute trains caregivers, conducts research on Alzheimer's care techniques, and advocates for policies that support both patients and care workers. Today, memory care facilities throughout the world use techniques that Linda developed during her 20 years of invisible service at Mercy General Hospital. Caregivers earn better wages, receive better training, and work in improved conditions partly because of the attention Elvis brought to their work. The story of Elvis and Linda Thompson reminds us that some of society's most important work happens in places where it can't be seen or easily measured. It shows us that expertise can develop in unexpected places, that heroism takes many forms, and that recognition can transform not just individual lives but entire professions. In hospital corridors around the world, there are still Linda Thompson skilled, dedicated caregivers whose work remains largely invisible. They hold hands during frightening moments, maintain dignity when everything else is lost, and provide comfort to people who can't thank them. Their work matters, their skills have value, and their dedication deserves recognition. The night Elvis found Linda crying in that hospital break room, both of them learned something important about the nature of heroism. Elvis discovered that fame and public recognition, while valuable, pale in comparison to the quiet heroism of people who dedicate their lives to caring for others. Linda learned that invisible work can become visible when the right person recognizes its value and chooses to shine a light on it. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is see the people whose work we take for granted, understand the skills required to do that work well, and find ways to support and recognize those who have dedicated themselves to caring for others. That's what Elvis did for Linda Thompson, and in doing so he improved care for thousands of Alzheimer's patients and changed the lives of countless caregivers who finally received the recognition they deserved. The Memory Care Unit at Mercy General Hospital still displays a plaque that reads, "In honor of Linda Thompson and all caregivers who provide dignity, comfort, and love to those who cannot remember. Your work is seen, your skills are valued, and your dedication makes a difference." It serves as a daily reminder that no act of caring is ever truly invisible, and that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to notice, to value, and to support the quiet heroes who make our world more compassionate. The legacy of Elvis and Linda's partnership extends far beyond the programs they created together. It represents a fundamental shift in how society views caregiving work and the people who dedicate their lives to it. Their collaboration proved that when we recognize and support invisible heroes, we create ripple effects that improve countless lives. In memory care facilities around the world, caregivers still tell the story of Linda Thompson and Elvis Presley as an example of what becomes possible when society chooses to see and value the work that happens in the shadows. It reminds us that expertise can develop in unexpected places, that heroism takes many forms, and that true leadership means using your platform to lift up those whose contributions might otherwise go unrecognized. The Linda Thompson approach to Alzheimer's care has become the gold standard in memory care, emphasizing dignity, individual attention, and the professional expertise required to provide quality care for patients with cognitive impairment. Training programs based on her methods have improved the lives of millions of patients and their families, while providing caregivers with the recognition and compensation they deserve. Every time a caregiver receives proper training, every time their salary reflects the value of their work, every time families understand that their loved ones are being cared for by skilled professionals rather than just kind-hearted volunteers. The influence of that midnight conversation between Elvis and Linda continues to make a difference. The story also highlights the power of unexpected partnerships. Elvis could have visited Robert Henderson and left without noticing Linda's distress. Linda could have hidden her emotions and continued suffering in silence. But because both were willing to be vulnerable, Elvis by asking genuine questions about work he didn't understand, Linda by sharing her truth with someone who had the power to help, they created something that transformed an entire field of healthcare. Today's memory care industry looks dramatically different than it did in 1975, partly because one woman's invisible sacrifice became visible when the right person was willing to see it, understand it, and use his influence to change it. The partnership between Elvis and Linda Thompson proves that recognition isn't just about making people feel better. It's about unlocking potential, improving systems, and creating lasting change that benefits everyone involved. In hospitals and care facilities everywhere, there are still caregivers working night shifts, holding hands with frightened patients, maintaining dignity in the face of devastating illness, and providing comfort to people who may not remember their kindness by morning. Their work matters, their expertise has value, and their dedication deserves the same recognition that Elvis helped Linda achieve. The question their story poses remains as relevant today as it was in 1975. Who are the invisible heroes in our communities, and what becomes possible when we choose to see them, value them, and support them? The answer might just change everything, for them, for us, and for the people whose lives they touch every single day. Linda Thompson's 20 years of invisible service became the foundation for a movement that continues to improve Alzheimer's care throughout the world. Her expertise, developed through dedication and refined through experience, created better outcomes for patients, better conditions for caregivers, and better understanding of what quality memory care actually requires. Elvis's decision to recognize and support Linda's work didn't just change her life, it changed an entire profession and improved care for countless families facing the challenges of Alzheimer's disease. Their partnership reminds us that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply pay attention to the people whose work makes our world more compassionate, and then use whatever influence we have to ensure their contributions are valued and supported. The night Elvis found Linda crying in that hospital break room marked the beginning of a transformation that continues today. Every caregiver who receives proper training, every patient who benefits from improved care techniques, every family who finds support during their journey with Alzheimer's disease, carries forward the legacy of a partnership that began with one simple question: what do you do, and why does it matter? In memory care facilities throughout the world, that question continues to unlock potential, create recognition, and transform lives. The invisible heroes are still there, still providing essential care with skill and compassion. The question is whether we're willing to see them, value them, and support them the way Elvis supported Linda Thompson on that transformative night in Memphis. The story of Elvis and Linda proves that heroism comes in many forms, that expertise can develop anywhere dedication meets need, and that recognition has the power to transform individual lives and entire industries. Most importantly, it reminds us that some of our most important work happens in places where it can't be easily seen or measured, and that the people who choose to do this work deserve our respect, support, and gratitude. Linda Thompson spent 20 years providing invisible care before Elvis helped make her work visible. Today, thanks to their partnership, millions of Alzheimer's patients receive better care from caregivers who are properly trained, fairly compensated, and professionally respected. That transformation began with one person's willingness to notice suffering and another person's courage to share their truth. Together, they proved that recognition isn't just about feeling appreciated, it's about creating the conditions for excellence, dignity, and meaningful change. The memory care unit where Linda worked for 20 years continues to serve patients and families facing Alzheimer's disease, but now it operates according to the principles that Linda and Elvis established together: that every patient deserves dignified care, that every caregiver deserves professional recognition, and that invisible work becomes powerful when the right person is willing to shine a light on it. Their partnership reminds us to look for the Linda Thompsons in our own communities, the people whose essential work happens behind the scenes, whose expertise develops through dedication rather than formal recognition, and whose contributions make our world more compassionate even when they remain unseen. When we find them, when we value them, and when we support them, we create the possibility for transformation that extends far beyond any individual life or career. The impact of their collaboration continues to ripple through the healthcare industry decades later. The Linda Thompson method of Alzheimer's care is taught in nursing schools across the country. Her approach to patient dignity has influenced medical ethics guidelines worldwide. The caregiver training programs she developed have been implemented in dozens of countries, improving care for millions of people with dementia and other cognitive impairments. Medical professionals who learned from Linda during her teaching years credit her with changing their understanding of what quality care really means. Dr. Sarah Martinez, who trained under Linda in the 1980s and later became Director of Geriatric Medicine at Johns Hopkins, wrote, "Linda taught me that expertise isn't just about medical knowledge, it's about understanding the whole person, maintaining dignity in vulnerable moments, and recognizing that every small act of kindness matters." The economic impact has been substantial as well. Studies have shown that facilities using Linda's care techniques have lower staff turnover rates, fewer patient injuries, reduced behavioral incidents, and higher family satisfaction scores. Insurance companies began offering premium rates to facilities that employed Linda Thompson certified caregivers, recognizing that better care led to better outcomes and lower overall costs. But perhaps the most significant change has been cultural. The story of Elvis and Linda helped shift public perception of caregiving from unskilled work that anyone could do to professional healthcare requiring specialized knowledge, emotional intelligence, and exceptional dedication. Caregivers began receiving the recognition they deserved, not just from their patients' families but from society as a whole. Professional caregiving organizations established scholarships and awards in Linda's name. The American Association of Memory Care Professionals created the annual Linda Thompson Award for Excellence in Alzheimer's Care, recognizing caregivers who demonstrate exceptional skill, compassion, and innovation in their work. Recipients receive funding to pursue advanced training and to develop new programs in their communities. The legislative impact has been equally significant. Linda's congressional testimony about working conditions in memory care facilities led to the passage of the Alzheimer's Care Worker Protection Act, which established minimum staffing requirements, mandatory training standards, and improved safety regulations for memory care facilities nationwide. The act also created funding for caregiver education programs and established a national certification system for Alzheimer's care specialists. These changes improved working conditions, increased wages, and enhanced the professional status of caregivers throughout the healthcare system. International delegations regularly visit the Linda Thompson Institute to study her methods and adapt them to their own healthcare systems. The World Health Organization has cited her work as a model for developing comprehensive dementia care programs in countries around the globe. Her influence extends beyond Alzheimer's care as well. The principles Linda developed, treating patients as whole people rather than collections of symptoms, maintaining dignity during vulnerable moments, and recognizing the expertise required for quality caregiving, have been applied to other areas of healthcare, including pediatric care, psychiatric treatment, and end-of-life support. Nursing schools now require courses in Thompson method patient interaction, teaching future healthcare providers how to communicate effectively with patients who have cognitive impairments, how to maintain dignity during personal care, and how to provide emotional support for both patients and families. The technology sector has also been influenced by Linda's work. Software developers have created applications that help caregivers track patient preferences, behavioral patterns, and effective intervention strategies. These digital tools are based on the detailed observation and documentation techniques that Linda pioneered during her years at Mercy General Hospital. Medical device manufacturers have designed equipment specifically for memory care settings, incorporating Linda's insights about how environmental factors affect patient behavior and well-being. Everything from specialized lighting systems to furniture designed for dementia care reflects principles that Linda developed through decades of hands-on experience. The pharmaceutical industry has also embraced Linda's holistic approach to Alzheimer's care. Drug companies now routinely include non-pharmacological interventions based on Linda's methods in their clinical trials, recognizing that medication alone is rarely sufficient to provide optimal care for people with cognitive impairments. Research institutions have established centers dedicated to studying the effectiveness of Linda's techniques. The Thompson Center for Memory Care Research at the University of Memphis conducts ongoing studies on communication strategies, behavioral interventions, and environmental modifications that improve quality of life for people with Alzheimer's disease. Their findings have validated what Linda knew intuitively from years of practice, that personalized, dignified care provided by skilled professionals produces better outcomes than standardized approaches that treat all patients the same way. This research has influenced treatment protocols worldwide and continues to refine best practices in memory care. The ripple effects of Elvis and Linda's partnership extend into unexpected areas as well. Business schools now teach case studies about their collaboration as an example of how public figures can use their influence to create positive social change. The case is used to illustrate principles of leadership, social responsibility, and the power of authentic partnerships between different sectors of society. Entertainment industry professionals cite Elvis's work with Linda as a model for how celebrities can engage with social causes in meaningful, substantive ways, rather than just lending their names to fundraising events. His deep involvement in understanding the issues and developing practical solutions has influenced how other public figures approach their own philanthropic efforts. The partnership also demonstrates the importance of listening to frontline workers who often have the deepest understanding of problems and the most innovative ideas for solutions. Linda's expertise came from experience rather than formal education, but Elvis recognized its value and created opportunities for her to share it with others. This model of recognizing and elevating expertise wherever it's found has been adopted by organizations in many fields. Companies now actively seek input from their most experienced workers when developing new policies or procedures, understanding that practical knowledge gained through years of experience is often as valuable as theoretical knowledge gained through formal education. The story continues to inspire new generations of healthcare workers who enter the field motivated by Elvis and Linda's example. Nursing students often cite their partnership as an influence on their career choice, drawn to a profession where they can make a meaningful difference in people's lives while developing genuine expertise through experience. Alzheimer's advocacy organizations use their story to illustrate the importance of supporting not just patients and families but also the professionals who provide care. Fundraising materials often feature Linda's quote, "We don't do this work for recognition, but recognition helps us do this work better." The quote captures an important truth about professional caregiving. While caregivers are motivated by compassion and dedication rather than external rewards, recognition and support enable them to provide better care by reducing burnout, improving working conditions, and attracting talented people to the profession. Today, more than 40 years after that midnight conversation in a Memphis hospital, the influence of Elvis and Linda's partnership continues to grow. Every caregiver who receives proper training, every patient who benefits from dignified care, every family who finds support during their journey with Alzheimer's disease is connected to the legacy they created together. Their story reminds us that transformation often begins with simple recognition, seeing people whose contributions might otherwise be invisible, understanding the value of their work, and taking action to support and amplify their efforts. In a world where essential work often goes unnoticed, their partnership stands as a testament to what becomes possible when we choose to see, value, and support the quiet heroes who make our communities more compassionate and humane. The Memory Care Unit at Mercy General Hospital continues to serve patients and families, but now it operates as a living monument to the principle that no act of caring is ever truly invisible when someone is willing to notice it, value it, and help others see its importance. That lesson, learned in a hospital corridor on a quiet Tuesday night in 1975, continues to change lives and improve care for some of our most vulnerable citizens throughout the world. The enduring power of Elvis and Linda's story lies not just in what they accomplished together, but in what their partnership represents about human potential and the possibility for positive change. Their collaboration demonstrates that meaningful transformation often begins with the simplest acts: paying attention, asking questions, and recognizing value where others might see only routine or invisibility. In healthcare facilities around the globe, there are still caregivers working through the night, providing comfort to confused patients, maintaining dignity during vulnerable moments, and offering skills developed through years of dedicated practice. Some of these modern-day Linda Thompsons work in state-of-the-art facilities with advanced training and fair compensation, direct beneficiaries of the changes that Elvis and Linda helped create. Others continue to work in conditions similar to what Linda faced in 1975: understaffed units, inadequate pay, minimal recognition, and the emotional weight of caring for people who cannot thank them. For these caregivers, the story of Elvis and Linda serves as both inspiration and hope, proof that invisible work can become visible when the right person chooses to see its value and take action to support it. The Linda Thompson Institute continues to expand its influence, establishing new training centers and developing innovative approaches to memory care. Recent initiatives include virtual reality programs that help caregivers experience what confusion and disorientation feel like from a patient's perspective, leading to more empathetic and effective care techniques. The Institute also operates mentorship programs that pair experienced caregivers with newcomers to the field, ensuring that the practical wisdom Linda developed continues to be passed down to new generations. These programs have significantly reduced burnout rates and improved job satisfaction among participating caregivers. Research conducted at the Institute has led to breakthroughs in understanding how environmental factors affect people with dementia. Studies have shown that specific lighting patterns, color schemes, and sound levels can dramatically improve patient comfort and reduce behavioral challenges. These findings have influenced the design of memory care facilities worldwide. The Institute's family education programs help relatives understand what their loved ones are experiencing and provide them with tools for meaningful connection even in advanced stages of the disease. These programs, directly inspired by Linda's belief that families are essential partners in care, have improved quality of life for both patients and their relatives. One particularly innovative program trains family members in simplified versions of Linda's communication techniques, enabling them to have more positive interactions during visits. Family members report feeling more confident and less helpless when they have specific skills for connecting with their loved ones. The international impact continues to grow as well. The Linda Thompson method has been adapted for use in countries with different cultural approaches to elder care, proving that the core principles of dignity, individualized attention, and professional expertise transcend cultural boundaries. In Japan, where respect for elders is deeply embedded in cultural values, Linda's techniques have been integrated with traditional approaches to create uniquely effective care models. In Scandinavian countries known for progressive social policies, her methods have influenced national healthcare standards and training requirements. Developing nations have adapted her low-cost, high-impact techniques to improve care in resource-limited settings. The basic principles of observing patient preferences, maintaining dignity, and providing emotional support can be implemented effectively, even without expensive equipment or extensive facilities. The World Health Organization's Global Dementia Strategy specifically references Linda's work as an example of how individual expertise can influence international policy and practice. Her story is used to illustrate the importance of recognizing and supporting frontline healthcare workers in developing comprehensive responses to global health challenges. Medical schools now include courses on the Thompson approach to patient care, teaching future doctors to recognize and collaborate with experienced caregivers rather than dismissing their knowledge as unscientific. This shift has improved communication between different levels of healthcare providers and led to more comprehensive treatment approaches. The economic research surrounding Linda's methods continues to demonstrate their value. Healthcare economists have calculated that facilities using her techniques save millions of dollars annually through reduced staff turnover, fewer patient injuries, decreased need for psychiatric medications, and shorter hospital stays. Insurance companies now offer incentive programs for facilities that employ Thompson method-trained caregivers, recognizing that the upfront investment in training and fair wages produces significant savings in long-term care costs. This market-based approach has accelerated adoption of her techniques throughout the private healthcare sector. The story has also influenced policy discussions about immigration and workforce development. Recognizing that many experienced caregivers come from immigrant communities, policymakers have created pathways for skilled caregivers to obtain professional certification and legal work status, understanding that their expertise benefits entire healthcare systems. Labor organizations have used Elvis and Linda's partnership to advocate for better working conditions and professional recognition for all types of care workers, from home health aides to nursing assistants. Their story provides concrete evidence that investing in frontline workers produces better outcomes for everyone involved. The entertainment industry continues to be influenced by Elvis's example as well. Musicians, actors, and other public figures regularly cite his work with Linda when explaining their own philanthropic choices. His model of deep engagement with social issues rather than superficial celebrity endorsements has inspired more meaningful charitable involvement across the industry. Documentary filmmakers have told Linda's story multiple times, each iteration reaching new audiences and inspiring additional support for Alzheimer's care and caregiver recognition. These films are regularly shown in nursing schools and medical programs to illustrate the importance of recognizing expertise wherever it develops. The digital age has created new opportunities to share Linda's techniques and philosophy. Online training platforms make her methods accessible to caregivers in remote areas who might otherwise lack access to professional development opportunities. Video libraries demonstrate her communication strategies and allow caregivers to learn from her example even decades after her passing. Social media has enabled caregivers around the world to connect and share experiences, creating global communities of practice that continue to refine and develop Linda's original insights. These networks provide mutual support and continue the tradition of experienced caregivers mentoring newcomers to the field. The technological applications of Linda's work continue to expand as well. Artificial intelligence systems trained on her observational methods can now help identify early signs of distress or discomfort in patients with advanced dementia, alerting caregivers to provide intervention before behavioral challenges escalate. Smart home technologies incorporate her insights about environmental factors that affect people with cognitive impairments, automatically adjusting lighting, temperature, and sound levels to optimize comfort and reduce confusion. These systems represent a high-tech application of principles Linda developed through careful observation and intuitive understanding. Mobile applications help family caregivers implement Linda's techniques when caring for relatives at home. These tools provide guidance on communication strategies, behavioral management, and when to seek professional help, extending her influence beyond institutional care settings. The research legacy continues to grow as well. The Linda Thompson Archive at the University of Memphis contains thousands of hours of video recordings, detailed case studies, and training materials that continue to inform new research projects. Graduate students and faculty from around the world visit the archive to study her methods and develop new applications. Recent studies have applied her observational techniques to other populations, including children with autism, veterans with traumatic brain injury, and elderly patients with multiple chronic conditions. The core principles of individualized attention, dignity maintenance, and skilled observation prove valuable across many different healthcare contexts. The archive also preserves recordings of Linda training other caregivers, capturing not just her techniques but her teaching philosophy and approach to professional development. These materials provide insight into how expertise can be effectively transmitted from experienced practitioners to newcomers in any field. Perhaps most importantly, the story of Elvis and Linda continues to inspire new partnerships between unlikely allies who recognize shared values and complementary strengths. Business leaders partner with frontline workers to improve working conditions. Artists collaborate with scientists to make research more accessible. Politicians work with practitioners to develop more effective policies. These partnerships follow the model that Elvis and Linda established: mutual respect, genuine curiosity about each other's perspectives, and commitment to using combined resources and influence to create positive change. Their example proves that meaningful collaboration can bridge differences in background, status, and expertise when participants are united by shared purpose. The annual Linda Thompson Memorial Lecture, held at Mercy General Hospital, continues to attract international audiences of healthcare professionals, policymakers, and advocates. Speakers have included Nobel Prize winners, heads of state, and distinguished researchers, all drawn to explore the themes of recognition, dignity, and the power of individual dedication to create systemic change. But the most meaningful speakers are often the caregivers themselves, people whose work was transformed by Linda's example, and who carry forward her legacy in their daily practice. Their presentations remind audiences that the most important measure of Linda's impact isn't in academic citations or policy changes, but in the millions of individual moments when patients receive more compassionate, skilled, and dignified care. The Memphis hospital, where Elvis found Linda crying in that break room, has become a pilgrimage site for healthcare workers from around the world. They come to see where the transformation began, to understand how one conversation between two dedicated people created ripple effects that continue to improve lives decades later. The break room has been preserved as a memorial space, with displays explaining the partnership and its impact. Visitors often comment on how ordinary the space seems: institutional furniture, fluorescent lighting, the kind of generic room found in hospitals everywhere. The ordinariness reinforces the story's central message: extraordinary change can begin in the most everyday circumstances when people choose to see, value, and support each other. The hospital's current memory care unit represents state-of-the-art design and programming, incorporating everything learned from Linda's work and subsequent research. Patients receive individualized care plans developed using her assessment methods. Families participate in education programs based on her teaching techniques. Staff members complete certification programs rooted in her philosophy of dignified professional caregiving. But perhaps the most important element is cultural. The unit operates with the understanding that every person, patient, family member, and caregiver deserves respect, recognition, and support. This culture creates an environment where excellence flourishes naturally because people feel valued and empowered to do their best work. The story of Elvis and Linda Thompson continues to resonate because it addresses fundamental human needs that transcend specific historical moments or cultural contexts. Everyone wants to be seen, valued, and recognized for their contributions. Everyone deserves to have their expertise acknowledged and their dedication supported. Their partnership proves that recognition is not a luxury or nicety, but a powerful force for positive change that unlocks human potential and creates conditions for excellence. When we see people clearly, understand the value of their work, and take action to support their efforts, we create possibilities for transformation that extend far beyond any individual life or career. In memory care facilities around the world, in family homes where relatives care for loved ones with dementia, in policy discussions about healthcare workforce development, the influence of that midnight conversation in Memphis continues to create positive change. Every time someone chooses to see invisible work, recognize unacknowledged expertise, or support unsung heroes, they follow the example that Elvis and Linda established together. The question their story poses remains as relevant today as it was in 1975. Who are the invisible heroes in our communities, and what becomes possible when we choose to see them, value them, and support them? The answer, as Elvis and Linda proved, might just change everything, not only for the heroes themselves, but for everyone whose lives are touched by their work and dedication. Their legacy reminds us that in a world where essential work often goes unnoticed and skilled dedication frequently goes unrewarded, we all have the power to be like Elvis, to pay attention, to ask genuine questions, to recognize value where others might see only routine, and to use whatever influence we have to support and amplify the efforts of people who make our world more compassionate and humane. Life, it changed an entire profession and improved care for countless families facing the challenges of Alzheimer's disease. Their partnership reminds us that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply pay attention to the people whose work makes our world more compassionate, and then use whatever influence we have to ensure their contributions are valued and supported. The night Elvis found Linda crying in that hospital break room marked the beginning of a transformation that continues today. Every caregiver who receives proper training, every patient who benefits from improved care techniques, every family who finds support during their journey with Alzheimer's disease, carries forward the legacy of a partnership that began with one simple question: what do you do and why does it matter? In memory care facilities throughout the world, that question continues to unlock potential, create recognition, and transform lives. The invisible heroes are still there, still providing essential care with skill and compassion. The question is whether we're willing to see them, value them, and support them the way Elvis supported Linda Thompson on that transformative night in Memphis.